Hello, my name is Lena and welcome back to my channel. I am a hype theorist and today we're going to be talking about ENHYPEN's comeback and like all of the sort of things that are surrounding the different versions of Dimension Dilemma and how it ties into like the story that we already know, the Dark Moon, like ENHYPEN's story, and then of course the mythology it came from, which I did sort of cover previously, but we're gonna like reiterate some of it. And then at the end, I'm gonna try to summarize what we can try to expect for the comeback. So yeah. ENHYPEN's Dimension Dilemma is set to release on October 12th, and while we do still have to wait for like the teasers to see what the music video will give us, we do have a lot of information about the different versions of the album. So previously in ENHYPEN's storyline, which is called The Dark Moon with ENHYPEN, the Dark Moon story seems to take place over multiple dimensions where ENHYPEN all exists. I think most of them are, of course, vampires. There's a lot of information about like the red sun and the red moon and how that like causes them to become vampires. They're in the middle of the transition of vampires, but we know that there's also like a sort of possible rival wolf faction that they might be fighting between each other, but we're still at the very beginning of their story, so a lot of the stuff that we have are hints for the future that we haven't yet seen in action. Also, it seems to double as commentary on idols and idolization and like how people tend to like sell their soul for money, for fame, etc, etc. In my previous video, as I said, I did talk a little bit about the mythology, like the two mythological creatures and Odysseus, which are the three versions of this album. So if you want like a more detailed breakdown of the mythology, click on my last video. I also believe I was saying scylla because that's what Google told me. Apparently the actual Greek pronunciation is scylla, so I'm going to be saying scylla, and if it's apparently scylla, I'm sorry. I'm getting conflicting information and I don't speak Greek. So yes, the three versions are Scylla, Charybdis, and Odysseus. Let's start with the Scylla version. Water, fire, chandeliers, and reflections. These are the images that encompass this entire version, along with a creeping feeling that they're being watched, or perhaps they're watching you. They have everything that they wanted, and yet nothing at all. In mythology, Scylla is like a Hydra-like creature. She's got a bunch of heads and like creepy tentacle things. And she is always paired with Charybdis. They're both like sea monsters who exist side by side. And of course, Odysseus, the hero, is tasked with either choosing one of the two obstacles or in some cases not choosing and just trying to go straight through these two monsters. Sometimes he chooses Scylla, who then eats 6 of his men before they escape, and sometimes he doesn't choose either, like I said, and Scylla still captures him, and he loses 6 men. Basically, it's a losing game. In fact, the like dichotomy between Scylla and Charybdis is often called like you have to choose the lesser of the two evils, or that you're caught between a rock and a hard place, something along the lines of that. So yeah, I do think that the Scylla version is representative of the vampire thing that we've seen, and this is because they've never had a choice in actually becoming vampires. They became vampires every single time. Hence why that's their storyline. We do get hints of this original monster in several of the photos, usually with art that sits kind of behind the boys. Anyways, in the Scylla version, we do have to think that whatever dilemma ENHYPEN is facing, the Scylla choice might actually be the lesser of two evils. Only because in the original myth, that's what they decided, like getting sucked into a whirlpool by Charybdis is probably instant death for everyone, so maybe them becoming vampires really was the best option for them. Again, this monster was always chosen for them, like whether it was willing or not, so choose or chosen, it didn't matter. They either chose it or it was chosen for them. And considering the very obvious visual connections to all three versions of the Border Carnival album, I definitely feel like that was the case. This is the option that takes them to their desires, which is immortality, vampirism, possibly being worshipped. It's the one that makes them vampires. We get the fancy chandeliers from up, the cityscape reflection from down, and the red light that presides over them all from hype. Of course, it has a lot more than that as well. For example, coins. They seem to be a major focus of this album version, seeing as it's even on the like back of the photo cards that we see. But this is especially true in relation to our favorite, Sanu, who seems to just mostly have the coins with him. He's the only one who has coins specifically, although he's not the only person with like money. Coins, of course, could come back to that idea of like idols, idolization, fame, money, success kind of thing, but also the idea that Sanu within the story is the one who's winning the treasure, like it was mentioned in the intro for this album. Or who is perhaps running the whole thing, because we have seen an indication of that. Or perhaps it refers to the fact that all you need to make a decision is a coin flip. By the way, the coins that we see here all have like a star symbol on it. A lot of people have connected it to the star from TXT. It does kind of look the same, but I do think the meaning here is different, because for TXT, the star is supposed to be Moa. The star watches over them, like, and as a fandom, you know, it's like a fandom thing for TXT specifically. And maybe that could be like the original meaning, like, you know, people put important things on coins. It's like, oh, being watched over. But I think in that sense, it's actually lost that original meaning in ENHYPEN's case, or it might mean something completely different. So, like, let me know what you think it might refer to. ENHYPEN does have a tie to, like, the sun and the moon, like I said, like the blood moon and the red sun. So maybe it's a tie to that. They also have, like, space themes going on. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. Of course, alternatively, you know, there are myths surrounding coins in Greek mythology. Charon, the, like, ferryman who like lives in the underworld and ferries dead people to the afterlife, requires a coin for you to take his ship, and you can't cross otherwise. This is usually placed under the tongue of a deceased person so that they can pay their way to the afterlife. It seems a little reminiscent of what's happening with Sungwoon in the Fever music video, except that in that case it's a necklace that is dropped and not a coin, although symbolism is sort of there. It also does seem to be tied specifically to Nikki and Sungwoon, like a controlling aspect. Even if it's a coincidence, I wanted to mention it. Speaking of Fever though, the boys in that music video at the beginning were chased by some sort of like creepy tendril-like darkness, and the music video explicitly shows Heesung getting dragged into like this room from that. And does that remind anyone else of Scylla? Like, I could sort of see that being a representation of Scylla, like an early hint. What are you constructing? Which means that this connection to Fever actually makes a lot of sense. They are pulled into it, and having a lack of choice, undergo the transformation into vampires, which kind of just explains Fever, like, really well, actually. Some other things that kind of tie into that: Jay is seen lying in water, very similar to Fever, and there's a red light looming over him in the reflection, and it kind of just feels like a loss of control, especially with like the money like lying around with him as well. It's a little all-consuming. However, I wonder if the water itself isn't telling us something, since the water is tied closely as a way to like get to the island that they mention in their intro, the magic island. A lot of their individual videos are telling as well. Sunu continues like the theme with the coin, obviously. Heesung is bathed in the red, yet similar to his photos, he seems to be partially hidden behind a curtain, perhaps referencing the darkness that trapped him in Fever. Or it might be an allegory for him like hiding something, like some part of his personality isn't like shown yet, he's hiding. Sungwoon is reflected in, showing us different versions of himself and tying us directly to that idea of the square mirror that is mentioned in Outer Wormhole, which also likely refers to the island. In the concept film, he's seemingly distressed and possibly trapped among the mirrors, the other versions. Perhaps he's literally trapped within the square of the mirrors? Interestingly, he was also one of the members prominently shown with a mirror in the Up version of the Border Carnival album. This is definitely going to be important since it's so emphasized. Let me know what you think about it. Like, will he be the first to the island? Is this a reference to the split in dimensions? And why specifically him? Is he the one who can travel through different dimensions? I don't know. Jungwon's video seems to have a callback to the rose that was not only on the cover of their Japanese album Border Hakanai, or Border Transient, but also their Choose Chosen video as well, where the flower set aflame was a representation of failure. Likewise, the lyrics of Outer Wormhole might reference this flower. There might be a world where day and night coexist, beside an ornamental flower. This actually seems to be related to the island again, a place where day and night are the same. But how does failure come into play here? Is it Jungwon specifically who fails? And what does he fail? Does he fail the members? Does he fail the timeline? Does he fail to do something? Or does it represent a more broad idea of failure, like as a group? Nikki seems to be lounging comfortably and lavishly among the chaos of a fallen chandelier. And to me that kind of indicates some form of like guilt that he caused it, maybe. In the concept film, he's lying among it and like is like unconscious, making me wonder if he literally fell with it. So Jay is in water again, like I've already mentioned. Jake is interesting because he's bathed in red light, and while this is similar to Hisung's, who's also in red, it also catches my interest because, of course, in the hype version of the Border Carnival album, he was the only one not in red light. Instead, he was in a blue light. Another interesting aspect is the golden laurel wreath circlet that he's wearing. Interestingly, this laurel wreath comes from Apollo, who was shown along with Artemis in the up version of the Carnival album. The wreath itself, in a historical sense, was awarded to people who, you know, showed a lot of athletic prowess, or to poets, people who were famous and well known for their writing. But it was meant to, surprise, surprise, represent immortality, specifically in the sense of enduring fame, which is also ENHYPEN's concept. In a way, this is a crown of immortality, and that ties right back into the, you know, vampire theme. It ties into the throne theme that we've seen since the placing of the wreath was called the crowning. Very interesting. Why do you think Jake has this crowning of the wreath? It's specifically him. In other videos they posted, it had them overlaid with the city, kind of looking as if they were peering out at it. The cityscapes that we see seem to be a mix of streets leading into crossroads and city buildings. I'm not entirely sure what this means, though I do wonder if it ties to the Gray City, despite it not actually being gray. For reference, this was actually something that has been copywritten by Hybe. It was Dark Moon, the Gray City, I believe. So it actually might tie into it. They also, by the way, copywrote the Blood Altar, and then something like the Foundation of the Moon. Both of these are obvious references to things that we've seen before. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because it's not something that a lot of people would find otherwise. But if they're going for that like Gray City theme, that ties right into TXT, who referenced the Gray City as well. Anyways, now that we have more questions than we started with, let's move on. Charybdis. There is no other direct opposite to Scylla than Charybdis, at least in terms of ENHYPEN. We went from like dark, broody imagery to like a light, open, and airy one. They're literally airing out their laundry. So Charybdis was the other monster that Odysseus had to face, or potentially had the option of choosing to face. This monster causes massive whirlpools, and would likely have sucked Odysseus's boat in to the whirlpool and killed his entire crew. With that in mind, it makes sense that they all chose to go with Scylla, because at least then you have a chance of like, you know, defeating the monster or running away from the monster versus like drowning. Of course, in the cases where he deigned not to make a choice, he still avoided this monster and was still attacked by Scylla. Luckily for him. Unluckily for ENHYPEN, this does still seem to be a choice, indicated by the word dilemma in their title for this album. But then it seems like Charybdis is tied to the idea of the wormhole as well, which is something that we've seen before. So perhaps it's not that unlucky. That, tied with the fact that in the album, the butterfly is the back of the photo cards, which the boys are actually trying to catch. Like, a lot of the photos have them holding butterfly nets. Now, if you're familiar with G-Friend's story in the Hype universe, you might know what these butterflies are about. The blue butterfly, when caught, allowed them to travel back in time. Wormholes have the potential to do that as well, as they generally are a way through time and space. It could take you back in time, or it could take you to another space. So I wouldn't be surprised if, in a way, ENHYPEN are emphasizing the same thing here. The ability to go back in time and to choose something else. If Scylla represented the like darkness of their desires paired with the whole idol industry image, then Charybdis would actually be the opposite, which would be the freedom to dream as normal people do. Within the parameters of the story, I think this represents their choice between like attending the lavish carnival or not. The alluring promise of the blue butterfly that would let them go back and fix things. There seems to be like a focus on like personal dreams within the album, specifically through the form of writing, but also through the photographs that they seem to have. Each of the individual versions of their photos is accompanied by like a cute little letter written by the ENHYPEN members, which sort of highlights like personal dreams and struggles and goals of theirs. And the photos that accompany it sort of like support what was written. For example, Nikki, in his letter, talk about his dreams of, you know, finding the time to paint all day, which is then reflected in his photos. All of the members do, however, have a shot of them lying down somewhere, whether it be like a bed or chair or whatever, and they have their eyes closed. Again, this ties to the whole dreaming magic island, where you close your eyes and then open them and your dreams become reality. This is similar to what is explained in the lyrics of Intro Whiteout. My eyes are closed. No. They're open. Now we stand in front of the most fantastic island in the world. You can take anything you want. We also get an image of like a bed lying in an open field at one point, implying that that's kind of where their dreams took them. Interestingly, the part with like the buildings and the field, like the ones where they're holding like the butterfly nets and everything, that is the exact same location that TXT was just in for their 0 by 1 equals love song music video, which is like one of their most recent releases. Now, I theorized particularly that this music video, this location for TXT, actually took place on Magic Island, and the fact that this is consistent with what we're seeing now with ENHYPEN just makes me like incredibly curious, and like is just another like justification that this is actually a dream for ENHYPEN as well. Like this particular thing is meant to represent that and like represent their dreams and their wants, which is, again, like I said, that's the kind of like vibe that the Charybdis album is going for. Again, this TXT music video was very recent. Like it just feels like them using the same location is an intentional thing for us to like notice. A couple other things of note. Keesung's hoodie says eschatology, which is the study of like how humanity will end, like the end of the world kind of thing. Funnily enough, that's actually how TXT have referred to Magic Island before. Like they say, oh, we'll meet at the end of the world, and it's talking about like their island. So that's interesting, especially if ENHYPEN are using wormholes to travel places. Maybe the wormhole is like another way of saying, oh, it's the end of the world, because it's like literally the edge of their reality and going into the edge of another reality. The book that Jake is reading is called The Edge by Dick Francis, and it's about like a plot that's going on and how the main character named Tor is trying to catch someone for like criminal corruption and blackmail. Interestingly, the person that he's following is named Julius Apollo Filmer. Which Apollo again? And with Jake again? Anyways, it's likely that Jake is taking the place of Tor in this book, if he's, you know, if it's referencing his story at all. So I would assume that he's the one trying to reveal the plot and the corruption. But who knows, since he was the one wearing Apollo's crown. This is an interesting book for him to be holding. I want to see how it refers to Jake's story in the future. But, of course, I can't not talk about Sunnu. First, he's got a dragon on his necklace, which is awesome. Anyway, Sunnu is in front of a whiteboard full of drawings. Now, if you know me, you know that I happen to love whiteboards filled with drawings. And there's just generally so much here going on that could probably be hints for what is to come. A bunch of the writing is probably lyrics from the album, so I'm not going to look too close at that right now. But let's look at the drawings really quick. First, there's a cat. I think Hive Universe fans know exactly why this cat is so exciting. Mainly because of the cat from BTS and TXT. This one doesn't seem to have 2 different colored eyes, but like TXT has also drawn cats that didn't have the 2 different colored eyes, and yet that cat is within their storyline. So there's a butterfly, which we already know is a reference to this version of the album, but like I said, could be related to the butterfly's time travel capabilities. There is a drink in the corner, which could be a reference to Drunk Dazed. There is a hand at the top, which could be related to the like Let Me In body parts. And then there's an apple at the bottom, which could be related to G-Friend and like their Apple music video, which has to do with them falling into like the labyrinth of their mind, the Magic Island kind of thing again, and like that idea of temptation, which again fits in with the Scylla version of the album. There's actually a lot more on here. I don't want to go into too much detail because it's just kind of fun to look at it. There's only so much that I can get from this right now without context, so it's gonna have to be something that I come back to later. So let's move on. Odysseus. The final version of the album that we haven't yet covered is, of course, the Odysseus version of the album. Odysseus was the hero who faced the 2 previously mentioned monsters. Now, this whole concept seems to take place on a beach, most likely on the islands that they mention in their intro, which is most likely Magic Island. Interestingly, Odysseus himself, sometime after facing Scylla and Charybdis, ends up on Calypso's island. He's actually kept on this island kind of against his will, actually. Like, Calypso just wants to keep him there as his eternal, immortal husband, and he's like a captive. So I just wanted to note that, but it does have to do with like immortality again, sort of. ENHYPEN do seem to be having a good time. Doesn't look like they're against their will, but who knows. I'm not sure if the island itself is actually an optional experience for them, you know? Seems to come along with all the time travel, dimensional travel, wormhole stuff. I think it's a part of their reflection of their subconscious, but also like an in-between place that just exists, which is why we see it so often. By the way, I'm sure many of you already know this, but I did fail to mention this in my previous video. It is likely the same location that we see at the end of TXT's Cat and Dog music video, the same beach. It looks really similar to this. I don't know how many beaches there are in Korea, which is kind of why I never mentioned it before, because like, you know, if you're gonna go to a beach to film, you might just be ending up like basically at the same beach. But, you know, Cat and Dog does take place mostly on Magic Island, like within the subconscious and within the dream, so maybe it is the same place. Maybe it is also meant to be like another additional point to the fact that this is on that island. I just wanted to mention it because I didn't want to get yelled at in the comments again. But yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to me if it was the same place, both physically, actually, and then meant to represent Magic Island. Anyways, the back of the photo cards does seem to be a representation of Janus, who is the god of beginning, gates, time, duality, passages, and endings, among others. The two faces are meant to sort of represent the whole journey from the beginning to the end, as in it's like something that you see all the way through. Considering what we know of ENHYPEN's journey, this is important symbolism to be using here. It's also got like two faces, possibly representing the two different decisions that ENHYPEN is facing. You know, one is Scylla and the other is Charybdis. However, interestingly, Janus is a Roman god and does not seem to have a Greek counterpart that I can find. It's strictly Roman in origin, which greatly differs from like the Greek themes that we're seeing throughout the rest of this album, like in its entirety. Very interesting. Is it just because Janus seems to fit and they're like, close enough? I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the Romans and the Greeks, but it should be noted that the photos itself and like the videos that they have do seem to also represent this idea of Janus and like time, passages, the beginning and the middle, the end, etc., where they have like the overlapping versions of themselves. But I think the beginning is the one that is most prominent, and then it's fading into what the ending will be, and which is why it's like a little bit more transparent, a little bit more uncertain, which then brings up more questions because Sunghoon is crying. I don't know what this means, but I guess Sunghoon like goes through it. Because wow. Does this have something to do with what we saw happening to him in Fever? Like I said, the individual concept videos also kind of show this as well, but it does seem to be more of like that obvious passage of different points of time. Some other photos of the boys do sort of feature them in what look like rugby outfits, and they all have numbers on the back. I can't figure out if the numbers are tied to anything in particular. The last time we saw numbers on the back of shirts was TXT, and it was all representing their birth months. That does not seem to be the case for ENHYPEN right now, though. I can't tell what the numbers mean, so if you have any sort of idea of what like each of the individual numbers might stand for, let me know in the comment. Maybe it's just random. Maybe they just liked those numbers. I don't know. Speaking of numbers, there is a scorecard in the back, which does seem to change in some shots, but in one particular photo, it does seem to say 5:53, which was pointed out by Fadoon in my Discord server. 5:53, if you know TXT at all, refers to Blue Hour, the magic hour, which happens at 5:53. And considering the lyrics of Blue Hour and the music video of Blue Hour is about like them going to their magic island, this place, again, that seems very telling that they are on an island with magic stuff. It's very fitting, you know, it's like a little Easter egg, assuming it was intentional. The flag that they're holding and the shirt logo that they have the same emblem that was on their school uniforms back in like Drunk Dazed, and of course the hype version of the album where we saw them in their school uniforms, so I'm guessing like this is a continuation of that somehow, because like it's the same place, it's the same emblem, it's the same academy thing. This makes me believe that the timeline must be similar to the Drunk Dazed music video. In terms of individual videos that we saw, there's only a couple things of particular note that I wanted to mention. Jake's video, yet again it's Jake, is playing in verse. Like, it's backwards for some reason. I don't know why this is, and I've carefully checked over the others, and I don't think anyone else's is playing backwards. So I can conclude pretty safely that Jake's is the only one to go backwards. And I don't know, maybe this is just continuing the same theme, that Jake is like this weird anomaly where nothing is exactly the same for him as it is with everyone else. It might relate to time travel, which I assume is possible here. Same with dimensional travel. I mean, if you can travel through dimensions, you could probably travel through time, because time is like another dimension, right? I literally had a whole video about time. You think I would know how time works. The second thing is Sunu. It's him again too, like, I swear. In his video he has some sort of like sound that he's reacting to. It might be like a boat horn. I can't tell. But it's interesting that it's only him who seemingly is reacting to any of the sounds at all. I do want to say that he's sitting in like the same pose that he always sits in, like this one. You know, that pose where he looks like he's trying to become small and like fold in on himself a little bit. I kind of assume this is an intentional thing because this pose makes him look more innocent and like small and fragile. I don't know. It makes me feel like it's more suspicious of him somehow. But what do you think is going on with him? Because there's a lot going on with him. And Jake, oh my god. Anyways, I have a couple final things to say here before we're done for today. The track list, of course. really quick since the track list did recently just come out. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time examining it. That'll come after when I like know all the lyrics and everything like that. But I do want to comment on a couple little things that I'm excited for. The title track is called Tamed-Dashed, which has so many interesting implications. First, this continues with like the title tracks having the theme of like slightly opposite ideas connecting, or perhaps it's meant to show like two different dimensions where they make different choices, and maybe that's why there's a dilemma in the first place. Anyways, the tamed half could easily show like the whole theme that they're going on with Scylla, for example, where they sort of tame the monster. It could also refer to them taming their inner monster, or like the vampire part of them, or that their desires might be taming them, which is kind of what the Scylla version seems to imply. But on the other hand, dashed could mean a great many things. You dash away, as in you run away, which they do talk about in the intro. Your dreams could be dashed or erased or given up, or perhaps washed away in a whirlpool, like charybdis. To continue with that, a dash is what you use to connect things together. A hyphen, a dash, a hyphen, which is exactly what's used literally in that exact title. And like the wormhole thing does, again, sort of tie into that, because the wormhole connects two different parts of time and space, right? I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if, again, like we get two different music videos portraying slightly different sides. So like for Drunk Days, they had the drunk side with the Drunk Dazed music video, but then they had the more dazed side with the Fever music video. I could see them doing that same thing again. And like, I'm just really interested to see like what they're gonna do with it. I feel like it has a ton of potential to go in a bunch of different directions, especially with all of the things that we've seen and like how it ties into mythology and like what the individual characters' motivations could do. And I'm really excited to see what they reveal with that. I don't know, it's a really fun thing for like music videos to do. In terms of other songs on the album, number 6 is very interesting. It's called Blockbuster, which again ties into the whole like fame thing, and they've been shown like as like directors or like holding cameras and stuff before. But this song actually features Yeonjun from TXT. Yes, TXT, who I won't stop talking about apparently. This is quite an exciting development because, you know, we did know about this collaboration before. We knew that one of the members of TXT was going to be working with ENHYPEN on a song on their new album. And a lot of people, including myself, kind of assumed like, oh, it's going to be a producer's credit, like where it's just like, oh, he's going to help produce, which is awesome. Love that. You know, Namjoon helped produce 0 by 1 Equals Love Song. Thought it would be like the same thing. Someone from TXT would be like a producer on the track. However, what I did not expect was what we got, which is a feature. Like an actual feature. Yeonjun is featuring. Hello? Most likely this is going to be a rap feature, but considering the major similarities between the two universes of TXT and ENHYPEN, and the fact that they're probably both under the HYPE universe, I'm really looking forward to the song. And I would absolutely cry if it got a music video, by the way. Like, I don't even know what the song is going to be about yet, but I would literally cry if this is the B-side music video. And finally, I wanted to end this part the same way that ENHYPEN ends their album, with an interlude. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not doing an interlude, but ENHYPEN has one. It's ENHYPEN's first interlude, which means that there's not an outro to this album. This chapter is not over. So whatever album follows this is probably going to directly connect to the beginning of this album. So I assume there's going to be another Dimension album, and it's going to be a different subtitle. So right now we have Dimension Dilemma, but then there's another one that could be Dimension something else. Probably going to continue the hero's journey that Odysseus goes on, but I'm actually not sure. But I can guarantee that it'll be about similar themes that are on this one because it's an interlude. So the interlude will continue, and then whatever the second album is, we're going to get the outro for that. I don't know if there's only going to be 2 albums in it. The previous set, Border Day 1 and Border Carnival, both only had the 2, unless you also count the Japanese album, but I could see them going with like duos for the story, at least right now. So I guess this could be like another 2-album series. I don't know, but I'm really excited. What do you think? In closing, I am beyond excited. Everything they're showing is leaving me with a ton of questions, which is always really great for me because I like looking into questions. But I do hope that they'll like answer some things that I've been wondering. To summarize, this album is about the choices that they have to make and the consequences that stem from each of their choices. This choice might be a commentary on money and fame, and it likely will tie into their vampire storyline where they have one part vampire and one part traveling dimensional things. Will they become the monsters? Will they run away to another dimension? Will they become the hero that overcomes all of the other obstacles? Also, what happens with the werewolves? Because how does that tie into that? Finally, some other questions to leave you off with. Is the woman in Drunk Days supposed to represent Scylla? Because it does like tie into that version really well. Is the city we see the Grey City? I already asked that, but I just want to ask it again because it makes me very curious. And why are they on the island anyway? Is it because they're traveling interdimensionally? It's like that one place that connects everything together. Like, what brought them there? How does the island tie with the carnival and them becoming vampires? I have a lot of questions, and I really hope that we get some answers. Anyways, do you guys have any predictions for the album or the music video? What kind of songs do you think we're gonna see on the album? Like, what genre of music? Anyways, leave a comment below and let me know what you think. As it is, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you gained some insight from this about where they might be going and are more excited now for the videos and stuff that's gonna come out in the future, like their music videos and the album. Oh my god. If you liked this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure that you subscribe with notifications turned on so that YouTube tells you every single time I post a new video. All of my social media is linked in the description below. And of course, I wanted to give a shout out to my patrons over on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for your support. As it is, stay sunny, my friends. Bye!